Hey everybody, welcome to this next episode of Adapt to Thrive, where we have Samuel Lathey from Bippit today talking about what they're doing in amidst this crazy health crisis that we've got going on right now. Entrepreneurship is experiencing a lot of challenges as a career, so it would be great to hear a little bit about what they're doing. But first, and I'm going to stop talking because we're recording this on Zoom and you can't see it yet, but Samuel has a fantastic custom background. So whilst introducing yourself, Sam, if you could just let us know a bit more about what you're doing. We'll see the custom background and I'll try and cut in the actual meme that it's referencing, but it looks like everything's fine over there.
Yeah, we'd like to think everything is fine, but in reality, there's so much going on, and there are fires to put out all over the place, as you can see. Just to give a bit of quick background about myself and about Bippit, Bippit is a mobile platform. It lets employees exchange messages with a dedicated financial advisor for free in the workplace. But as we can see, the workplace has radically changed over the last month. So Bippit has had to make some significant changes to the way that we operate and we distribute our solution. And we can talk about that in a moment. My background is in wealth management, although if we go back far enough, I used to be a professional musician, but perhaps that's not particularly relevant to today. And in financial advice and wealth management, it's still a really antiquated system. And if you want to talk to a professional, if you want to talk to an expert about your financial concerns, of which people at the moment will have really acute financial concerns, it's expensive and it's inconvenient and it's really hard to get access to the right sort of support. And with Bippit, we're fundamentally changing that way of interacting with a financial expert to make it available to everyone.
So that's fantastic. There are clearly therefore two sides to this coin. I mean, first of all, I think it's hugely valuable what you're doing anyway. As someone who's tried to have those meetings with people, have to be done in person, and that felt like it was kind of, as you rightly said, antiquated at the time, and now that's never been more apparent. So the two sides of this coin are that the business seems to be set up as a product, as an experience, to be able to thrive in this sort of circumstance where people aren't able to access in-person services. They're looking to do it online. You are already the genuine alternative and ideally the new status quo. But if your route to market is through companies that are delivering that as a primary route to market right now, through employees that are delivering it as like a value add and a better experience for people to look after their financial well-being, those people aren't in that workplace right now. So I'm curious how you're addressing that, and is it going well for you right now? Is this good for business, or is it a big challenge, and or is it both?
I think it's probably both. I mean, you're quite right. It's our sort of main distribution channel is through the workplace. You know, this is effectively an employee benefit, and so our customer is the company. And then, you know, the end user is the employee. And depending on which industry you're communicating with at the moment, they're in crisis mode, a lot of them. Certainly service retail industries, they just simply don't have the bandwidth to deal with getting support to their employees when they're desperately trying to save their business, in effect. But there are still opportunities for those companies that are either stable in this new reality that we're in, or in fact thriving in this new reality. And those are companies that will still be able to focus on supporting their employees because they'll know that their employees are anxious, they're stressed, confused, their personal finances and what's going on right now, and they desperately need support. So as soon as it became apparent that the world was starting to move into a completely new way of working, around about a month ago, we did two things almost immediately. We packaged up a short-term support solution still selling that B2B. So whereas before we would be selling this long-term financial well-being and support service, which was all app-based, it would get rolled out to employees, and they'd be interact with a financial advisor, and they'd be able to ask any questions that they had. Well, there simply wasn't the time to roll that out when people were in such acute need of support. So we packaged it together as a call service. So it could then be sent round to all staff immediately. An employee could click a link, book a time with our bank of advisors, who we made available in evenings and weekends to avoid any disruption to the working day. Then it would be automatically scheduled, and they'd be able to get that support within a matter of hours, rather than a matter of weeks rolling this out as a sort of larger wellbeing platform. But the second thing that we did was that we saw that there was a huge opportunity on the consumer side rather than on the B2B side. You've got people who are at home in varying degrees of anxiety and concern about their personal finances. You know, there are concerns about job security, there are concerns about being furloughed and being made redundant. And every day there seems to be new information from the government, which is, unless you're a finance expert, quite hard to digest. So we're also making our product available direct to consumers. So we immediately put in a paywall and publish the app on the Apple App Store. So it's now available for people to access directly. It is a paid service, but it's radically cheaper than accessing traditional financial advisors. People can download the app and within minutes get answers to those really, really difficult questions that might be bubbling around at the moment.
So then these sound like things that might have been on the roadmap already. I'm curious if this has forced new innovation for you, or if it's just changed the whole roadmap and you're bringing things that were much further down the road, far closer. And if that's actually been a positive for you, exciting to do, in the given circumstances, being quite morbid, but is that something that you feel has actually been a positive during this period? And then also, how is that going to affect the rest of the world? Do you see your industry and other industries doing a similar thing, moving their roadmap forward, making innovations because of the necessity to do so? Or do you think this is going to change the whole face of, certainly in financial advisory, completely?
Well, I think business in general is large multinational companies have had to become remote and digital almost overnight. So coming out the back of this, regardless of whether we're in a recessionary environment, that's fundamentally going to change the way that people work. There are no longer any excuses that, you can't work from home because of X, Y, Z. You've had to do it and we've had to make it work. So, now it should be available. And that's ultimately better for us as society, because it means that we can spend more time with our families. And I guess, when it comes to, what we've done and whether that was on the roadmap anyway, and, what that looks like, I guess it's kind of exciting and terrifying in equal measure, because for Bippit in particular, there's a real opportunity here. People's need for financial support has never been more acute. And for us as a business, that's an opportunity to help people more often and in a wider way. But it's also terrifying because we don't know what the future is going to be like. Certainly on the B2B side, because when we were selling this as an employee benefit and getting early traction as an early stage business, we're like, this is great, everything's going fantastically well. And then, this pandemic came along and fundamentally changed the outlook for, 12 months, maybe even 24 months in the employee benefits industry. So then it's a case of, we have to adapt this to serve these short-term needs on a B2B side, because if we can serve these companies now, then there is a potential engagement on a longer term. But we just don't know what it's going to look like out the other side. Certainly, it's going to be a tougher environment for companies who are watching their capital expenditure more closely. And broadly speaking, as an early stage company, it's going to be a really tough fundraising environment as well.
Yeah, so you're in the midst of going from, for those who obviously understand the narrative, from a pre-start to a seed company, and starting to look for an institutional investment. Wondering how that looks for you from a fundraising perspective, and also how you may be changing operationally as well, because you've got a distributed team of advisors who are managing the advice through the platform that you run, and then a core central team too. Um, have you changed anything operationally, and then how does that look from an investment perspective going forward?
So thankfully, we haven't had to furlough any of the team. It would be kind of counterintuitive if we did, because we see a huge opportunity here. But I mean, I should frame that by saying we're still a relatively small team. If we had started to scale the team, then maybe we would look to cut expenditure. And we have a decent sized runway, so we're in a really fortuitous position. But that's tempered by what VC is going to look like in the next 2 years. The stage that we're at, I suppose, could broadly be considered in the gradient between pre-seed and seed. So the product is there, we have early engagement metrics, revenue is starting to come through. So before the pandemic, we were in a position where, okay, within 3 to 6 months, we're going to be able to see those metrics coming through that can support institutional investment. And all of those VC contacts that we've made over the past year might start to come through. But I think the reality is that although every venture capital fund will say, yeah, we're open for business, it's just going to be so much more competitive, and valuations are going to be pushed down. And that's great in a way, because the best companies will get funded, and you're going to see fantastic companies come out at the other side of this. But on the flip side, a lot of really good companies are also going to die. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of it, because of the capital being clogged up a little bit.
Well, hopefully, taking the optimistic and positive view here, the companies that do come out the other side with great businesses will also, hopefully, thanks to you guys, have well looked after teams using Bippit as a platform. Wanted to make these kind of fairly short and sweet, and the information you've given so far has been really fantastic. Good to get a view on the sector and what you're doing, on how you're changing and how you're adapting. Wondered if we might be able to round up with just some predictions you might want to make, or tips and advice you might be able to give to anybody else that's going through something similar right now. I mean, I guess hindsight will be a wonderful thing, and we'll look back and at some point know whether what we thought was correct really was or not. But anything that's gone really well for you so far that you think other people might be overlooking, or anything you think people should be keeping an eye on right now?
Yeah, so I mean, there is so much information out there from the government, and in the UK, we're in a great position because government has really stepped in a significant way to support companies. There are rumours about additional support for loss-making startups as well. And my advice would be keep your ear to the ground and make sure you take advantage of any opportunities. There are grants available both through Innovate UK and other channels if you're a loss-making startup. The bank loans that are being made available at a very cheap rate might not be available to a lot of startups because they might not have that revenue track record to be able to be accepted for those loans, but there are opportunities out there. But I think the fundamental thing is to make sure that you position yourself as a company to really serve these acute needs. Now, regardless of what industry you're in, there are ways to help people, because when people have an acute need, there's potential to build a really effective business. So it might mean some really difficult decisions, and it might mean a lot of guesswork and not much data to go on. But if you can find a way through this maze and reach those people who have really acute needs right now, you can build a really successful business. When it comes to Bippit, in terms of where we're going in the future, I think everything is kind of converging towards autonomous finances. You know, we're going to get to a point where it's what I like to call Google Maps for money. So you decide on your destination, and your destination might be, I want a house, 2 kids, I want to live in the suburbs of London, whatever it might be. And your sort of autonomous finance platform will be able to chart that for you based on all of the data you've had so far and predictions about what happens. And then it will be able to adjust itself for traffic. So if suddenly the traffic frees up and you get a bonus, then your destination time of arrival becomes a lot sooner. And I think the sooner we get there, the better, because financial services are so distributed and so antiquated and clumsy, and it shouldn't be. It should be really, really simple. You know, we should be able to analyze that data and get someone from A to B in the most efficient way possible. And the way Bippit positions itself is that the start of that journey is getting real, dedicated, professional human help from a regulated financial advisor to set you on the right track so you understand the basics and you can move in the right direction. And I think when we get to that point of autonomous finances, you know, managing your money, doing your banking, it won't be something that you do anymore. It'll be something that just happens for you.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, I'm personally looking forward to being able to have all of my finances managed in the palm of my hand, essentially. And as soon as it's available on Android, very soon I'll be downloading it, as I'm part of the Samsung crowd right now. He says, filming this on his MacBook. It's very confused product experience at my place. But yeah, I love the fact that you're looking at how data powers the decisions that, you know, the average Joe doesn't want to have to make every day, and the calls that we don't necessarily need to be having. If something can start to decide those things for us, because it is fairly algorithmic, then that would be powerful. But in the meantime, that human touch is vitally important, certainly in times like these when, you know, the discussion and the humanity and the emotion is really important too. You know, people worried about furloughing and unemployment need to be able to jump on somewhere that's, you know, not physical and have that conversation with someone who really understands it. And that's clearly what Bippit's doing. So more power to you. I'm going to wrap up there, but I really thank you for joining us today to help us demystify what's going on right now and tell us how you're looking to adapt to thrive during the public crisis. Before we end, curious as to where people can find you.
Yep, so Bippit.com, that's Bippit.com, for all the information about the company. And if anyone wants to connect with me, it's Samuel Lathey on LinkedIn. And yeah, feel free to drop me a message there.
Perfect. Right now, you are leading the stakes for the best custom background on any of these interviews we've had. So we'll be sure to set up an internal leaderboard and make sure that people can find that somewhere too. But thanks again, Samuel. And yeah, stay safe. Try and put out those fires where you can. And thanks for looking after the financial well-being of our nation.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Ash. Take care.